Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you're tuning in from. And thank you for joining me for another live stream. My name's Lee Robinson, and I've been doing a series of live streams where I bring on all different types of guests to talk about anything and everything, from design systems to the back end to the front end to the future of search. And the format of these live streams is pretty informal. We chat about a variety of different questions and topics. Feel free to leave any questions in the chat as we're going, and we'll try to bring up and answer some of your questions as we proceed on. So thank you all for joining today. I'm really excited to talk with Sarah Dayan. Hopefully I got that. Sarah is a staff software engineer currently working in the DX chapter at Algolia. She's interested in utility first CSS and testing practices, and she's a big advocate for this on her blog and at tech conferences. So I have a link to her blog and Twitter in the description. Definitely go check that out. So without further ado, please give a warm round of applause and welcome to Sarah.
Hi, Lee.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I am excellent. Thank you so much for joining. I know it's later. You're in London, right?
No, I'm in France. I'm in Paris.
Yes. Yep. So I know it's later there. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out and chat a little about the future of search.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really delighted to talk with you about that, especially because that's a topic that I've been really into for the last 3 years now. And there are so many things to talk about. There are so many things to dig into, because search is kind of everywhere. It's not really just the search box where you type iPhone or MacBook on Amazon.com. It's kind of everywhere. It's in your TV. It's in your phone. It's in a chat box when you're looking for help. It's everywhere, and there are so many interesting things to do with search.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when most people think about search, they're thinking of the really easy version of search. And the reality is it goes so much further and so much deeper. And that's why I'm really excited to dig into some of the advanced things that y'all are working on. How long have you been at Algolia?
It's going to be 3 years in May.
Nice.
Time flies.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. That's really impressive. And have you kind of always been working on the DX side of things there, or have you done lots of things while you've been there?
So at Algolia, I've been mostly working on DX. Now, DX means many different things at Algolia. We have many SDKs to index your data into Algolia. We have UI libraries. We have documentation. We have community tools like DocSearch. I've been mostly working on documentation. This is the main topic that I've been tackling. But I'm also very into community. I love interacting with people on social media, including people who have questions about search. I love blogging also. So really, to me, that aspect of DX is much more than just the documentation or the things we ship, but it's also the connection that you have with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's about that community in its entirety. And when you're making a better developer experience, or just improving your product, you also have to think about how that affects the community too, and how you interact with them. So I definitely agree with that. One of the things that I'm really excited to learn more about is, when I've used Algolia in the past, it's been for things like documentation, or when I needed to just add search to relatively smaller sites. But the reality is that Algolia spans much further beyond that, much further than the documentation site, up to some pretty amazing large experiences for handling search. And I think one of the ones that I'm really curious to hear more about is, it sounds like there's a big investment with the AI focused search at Algolia. Could you tell me maybe just a little bit more about that and really what that is?
Yeah, definitely. And we can go deeper later on if you want. But like, the idea around search and AI, first is that the first thing you need to know is that when you talk about AI, for many people, it's like, that kind of magic, even sometimes a bit bullshitty word, where like you put everything in it and it does magic. But the idea around, so there are two branches of AI that specifically and particularly apply to search. The first one is natural language processing and understanding. So making sure that you understand queries from how the way people speak, like they will ask questions. It's not always I type a bunch of keywords. Sometimes people will type a question, or they will ask a question. When you use Siri, when you use Alexa, you're gonna speak like you talk. You're not gonna use the keywords. So that's a part of it, making sure that your search engine is able to understand what you mean. And it can be many things. Like, for example, if you say, hey Siri, who won the game last night? Then Siri has to understand what game it is, and when you say who, that you're referring to a team, and what happened last night. So there's that need of like removing words that don't make sense, translating some others. When you type hot sauce, you probably mean spicy sauce. So that's also something you need to be able to understand how people search, how they express themselves, and give them back something that they want. So that's one part of it. But then you have the whole like machine learning aspect, because like there are many things that make good search. You have speed, good textual matching, like business metrics that will affect the relevance. But ultimately, when you think about great search, like not only good search, great search, Amazon great search, Google great search, it's going to be search that is relevant to you as an individual. If I type, I don't know, if I type Harry into Amazon, I may be looking for something that is going to be different from what you search for. And it's because we're two different people. We have different kind of interests. And so it does not make sense to give you things back that are going to be the same as mine. So that whole aspect of relevance, but cater to you as a person, knowing what you mean. For example, when you look for, I don't know, Nike, you type Nike on a sporting goods retail site, you might be looking for so many things. It could be clothing, it could be like caps, but most likely you're going to look for shoes. And we can know that because we may know that most people who type Nike then end up buying shoes. So there's that whole idea of making sure to bridge the gap between what you want and what you will find, and to lead you closer to that. And all the signals that allow you to do that are not doable by hand. So this is where machine learning gets in and helps you. Anybody who has any kind of website has the same kind of like enterprise great search than Amazon and Google have, with their huge teams of developers working on specifically search.
I think one thing that you said that I really like is the content has to be personalized. And when I think about the applications for search at a large scale, you think about things like e-commerce. You think about experiences like Netflix, where it is so critical that the results that you get back are catered towards your interests. So one thing I'm curious about is, you talked a little bit about like natural language processing and understanding the content of these searches. How does that actually work when it goes into training the models to understand the personalization? Like it's per person, right? Like it builds a entity or a model around who is Lee, right? Or who is Sarah. So accurate?
Yeah, there are many aspects to it. And so if we talk specifically about Algolia, there are many products. We have personalization, which works differently from some of the products that we have in Algolia AI. But I can give you a few examples. When it comes to you as a person, so let's say you are using Amazon, so you're logged in on Amazon, we know who you are. And so we're able to understand who you are based on what you do. And so what's going to work specifically in Algolia is that whenever you do something that we think is either related to search or not, but may be telling us who you are, the site is going to be able to send to Algolia events and saying, okay, Lee just bought this, or after searching for this, Lee bought that, or he put that in his wish list. So all those events, all those behavior-based events are going to, at some point, build up an idea of who you are. And so based on that, the person who owns the site, so let's say Amazon, even though they're not using Algolia, I can tell you that, but any shop owner is going to be able to start understanding who their customers are, and they're going to be able to determine the impact of personalization and saying, okay, this person likes this. And so it's going to be, for example, tied to when you type something, you will go to DVDs. You will buy a DVD or a Blu-ray. Some people will buy a book. So if you have, let's say we were the example of Harry Potter, are we going to give you back the book or the movie? And that's going to probably be based on what you usually buy or what you usually like. So that's the personalization aspect of things, which is really persona related and individual related. Now, there is the other aspect, which is the whole model training and probabilistic model. So far, when you think about search, we're in a really deterministic model. You type something, like you have an input, you have the same output all the time. Like when you write tests, that works up to a point. Now, if you think, for example, at the very beginning of 2020, like before COVID expanded to the entire world and spread in the entire world, if you typed mask, you would likely be searching for something that would be radically different from what you're searching for today, or even just 3 months after the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
So if you have a deterministic search, it's going to require a significant amount of human work to adjust that, to shift that. But if you have search that can dynamically adjust to the situation and to what other people are doing, not necessarily you as an individual, but how people are behaving. They type mask and then they search something, then they buy something, which is different from what they were buying before. If you're able to readjust based on that, then you have search that is much more resilient and that goes with how the world evolves. So that's the other aspect, which is not necessarily based on you, but based on how things are happening and based on trends.
And I imagine in the old situations there's somebody who's having to manually train that data or manually match that data to those, or re-rank or resort those results, because, mask could be matching like a Halloween mask or, like a protective mask, and not necessarily like a N95 mask for COVID or something like that. So that's actually a really great example to think about the importance of being ahead of that, so that when that situation happens, your site is already dynamic enough to basically adjust to what your customers are actually asking for.
Yes, and the thing that we have to understand is that even though I'm working with search every day, so that's my main focus, but if you're building a site, that's such a small part, such a small concern in all the things that you have to think about. So in e-commerce, that's probably a big concern, but still, you have so many things to think about, fulfilling, pricing, etc. So search is not something that you will work on every day. So all that part of, by the way, we might be needing to adjust this or that because people are now buying masks for COVID. And so we need that to be up. And how are we going to do that? We're going to just art code it or, promote it aggressively. Or you can trust something that is going to be has much more power to do it for you. So that's the idea behind probabilistic search, is less relying on human intervention and just also like, yeah, textual matching and stuff like that, but also going into how are people behaving.
And it's so true that search is so complicated, yet probably not the primary, the primary business for a lot of these folks. And that's why whenever I'm suggesting solutions to people, I always say like something like search, right? You don't want to hand roll that. Something like payments, you probably don't want to hand roll that. You have the Algolias and the Stripes of the world who are drastically simplifying your life and giving you that world-class search or that world-class payment where you don't have to necessarily do all that legwork. I'm curious too. I only know a little bit about natural language processing, and I know there's ways that people do this right now. And so I think it's really cool that Algolia is basically giving you the APIs for that, so that it's just part of your search experience. Because it like isn't I want like when you search in photos on like Apple Photos, and you can type in cat, and it just automatically figures out that you were looking, like it finds all the pictures that had cats. Like that's the stuff that blows my mind too.
Yeah, and so then again, here you have there's the like metadata based kind of search, and then you have the image search. So image search is not something that we do at Algolia, but still that's a very that's a topic that exists. Like in Google, that's also what they do, and they can do. You can do reverse image search. You can take your phone and send a picture of a cat to some of the Google APIs, and it will return like more photos of cats, or they will give you text back that says, "Hey, that's a cat." So that's pretty interesting. But you know what? The great thing with like the API model, like the API based services, is that you can actually group and link them together. Like you could take a picture with your phone, send that to Google. It's going to send back some words, and then you can send that to Algolia, and it's going to send back search results. And that's super interesting that today you're able to bridge all those services together to create a whole. And that's something that I'm really excited about, is that we're moving past the search box. We're moving past, the search input where you type. Now, it's Siri, it's Alexa, Google Assistant, whatever. But it's also how we bridge many technologies together to create a package, and you don't even know that it's search inside of it. So like, there was a concept that I saw on Dribbble. It was a couple years ago, and it blew my mind. It was something where you saw, a messages app, like on your iPhone, and you saw two friends talking to each other, and one was like, "Let's book plane tickets." And so in the concept, the other one started searching using, the text area, and started searching for plane tickets, and then from that search was able to send the plane tickets right in the chat. So you have search here, and then the other says, "Okay, I will pay half of it." And so then you have payment coming in with two payment widgets, like each having their own widget and paying, and then boom, they have bought their plane tickets. So that's a concept. But I think this is fantastic, because you don't even know it's search. You don't even know that you're using search and payment. You're using a whole thing, a whole experience that makes everything more fluid, instead of having to go online and doing stuff like that. Like you can do everything where you want it, exactly where you want it. You don't want, when I'm on my smart TV, I don't want to use my remote control to say, "Okay, show me latest Lee Rob live streams." I just want to say, "Show me Lee Rob live streams." There's no way I'm going to use my remote to type stuff. So that's the idea. You really want to remove friction. You want to remove like the friction between like the person and what they're looking for.
Yeah, I agree so much. I think the best example for me, the first time I saw it, absolutely just blew my mind. Every time I use it, it still blows my mind. What used to be and is still kind of Shazam, which is, using search to determine what song is playing. And now that it's like built into Siri and the Google Assistant stuff, you just basically like hold your phone up and say, what song is this? And it like analyzes the waveforms and just magically figures out what song it is. Like, I always think back like 50 years ago, if you were just to drop a cell phone in somebody's hand and be like, hey, just ask this magical device what song is playing, and it did that, people would lose their minds. They would
Absolutely. I remember that. I remember that I did not have an iPhone. I was on like some non-smartphone, and I saw my friends with their iPhones doing that. I was so jealous that they were able to do that. And you know, like it's really interesting. We were talking about search AI and search. Imagine that tomorrow you could have, okay, you search for a song, and so you get the song back, but you could also have recommended songs right away on your phone based on that. And so that's also what AI helps you doing with machine learning, based on either your taste, because it has access to your Spotify, or based on what other people who listen to that song or search for that song with Shazam have listened to or have bought after that. So that's really interesting how you can bridge all those technologies to ultimately create products that help people. That's one of the things that I love on Spotify, for example, is that when I'm done with a playlist, it finds new songs. So it doesn't stop, it doesn't loop. It finds new songs, and every time it's dead on. And that's not something like you can do that manually, but chances are you're going to mess it up. So when you have such technologies to do that, you're really pushing the limits, because you're going into, okay, let's learn about people, let's analyze their behavior to give them what they might want.
Exactly. I was digging into Algolia, just trying to learn more about Algolia AI, and I saw something about a partnership, or that you work with or you use OpenAI. Is that like a underlying like partnership or technology that you work with?
Yes, this is something that we use right now for Algolia Answers. So Algolia Answers, basically, you're going to be able to use, we were talking about natural language processing. You're going to be able to say something like, who won the game last night? And so instead of going directly to Algolia, this is going to hit OpenAI, which is going to be able to analyze it and really find the relevant keywords, so that then when you get it back, you can input that to Algolia, and you're going to get results that are much more tailored to what you actually meant than if it was straight away going into Algolia. And so with something like that, I don't know if you saw on Google, when you type something on Google, you have so many different kinds of results, which is really awesome. And there is one thing which is people also ask. It's like an accordion, and people also ask, and you see actual questions. And so you are going to be able to build something like that, where, for example, let's say you have, at Vercel, you have probably a support team. And so when you want to scale that, you will want to have some kind of a knowledge base. And historically, knowledge base tend to suck because it's hard to search into it. But if you're able to create actual answers to some questions, and then people are able to use natural language to ask those questions, you're going to be able to feed them back something that looks exactly like an answer that a human could have given them. So you create a lot more satisfaction, because you're not asking people to adapt to your technology, but you're adapting your technology to how people behave. So that's the whole idea. And I think it's not only the future of search, it's going to be the future of many things of like technology and service, is adapting more and more, using what we know, using those new technologies that we are starting to learn more about, to adapt to how people behave.
It's like you read my mind, because Vercel continues to have a knowledge base that sends information to Algolia, and there's like some kind of index, and then it helps people answer more, more human readable questions, like how do I get DNS to work, or like how do I add a domain. So I think they're very much aligned with that same train of thought, because we were, trying to make it more ergonomic for people to ask the type of questions that they're actually thinking, or the problems that they're actually running into, or like the stack traces that they're actually seeing in their console.
Yeah, and this is something that we're actually experimenting right away in our own docs. For like, one of the things for me that, like, one of the things I love is that knowledge about your company, product, technology does not only live on your site, in your realm, in your on your domain. It lives everywhere. And like, one of the best places where you're going to find information about your own product is on Stack Overflow.
Oh yeah.
And so, but the way, like, and Stack Overflow does a really good job at making sure that people ask good questions. They have a lot of technology that they developed over time. So you have, when you type something on Google, like a question or a problem, you will likely find a Stack Overflow answer. And so how awesome would it be if you could also, in your own product, bring answers from Stack Overflow that might better answer questions that your users have? I think that's really awesome. That's something that we're experimenting with right now with Algolia Answers, and using data from Stack Overflow, is bringing those answers right away in the documentation. Like, if you don't find it in the docs for some reason, because it's not formulated the same way, maybe it's on Stack Overflow, but we are not going to force you to go on Google and do a search for it. You're going to have it right away. So that's pretty interesting. You can think of it for issues. Like, you have probably issues and many conversations on the Next.js repository. If you're able to bring that in the experience, the search experience that you create, then you're able to redirect people to exactly what they need much more easily than if you have to look for it yourself, or remind that, oh yeah, that was a conversation that happened 3 months ago.
Well, even diving into like the search on GitHub is pretty good. But even thinking about if it was more personalized to remember the issues or the discussions that I had already looked at, or it was able to kind of link those things together. I know that I'm frequently going between GitHub discussions, GitHub issues on Next.js, and there's like there's hundreds and hundreds of them that go back for a while. So then you kind of have to stitch the pieces together and figure out how they're all connected. Something like Algolia kind of helps with that manual work that it takes to put those pieces together. That's really awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And like, you're talking about GitHub, and it's usually a topic that can frighten people working in search, because code search, it's so different than keyword search. And yes, like, granted, that's a whole different ballgame. When you're looking for JavaScript code, it's different than when you're looking for Scala code. But then you can also shift the way you look at it. It's not necessarily just, I'm looking for code and it needs to really understand the semantics of my code, but it's more like, I was working on that file recently, or that that is the file that changes the most, or that that is the file that got so many PRs, or that is the issue. So it's also based on how you behave. Not everything smart has to be AI related. There are things that you can think about when you're building a search experience, which is something I'm really passionate about, is trying to augment search with things that you see, or signals. So we were talking about e-commerce earlier. Like, imagine you buy an ink cartridge for your printer. If you type cartridge 3 months later, you probably want the same. You probably want the same brand. So that's something like, you don't need AI for that. You just need to store the information. So that's something that you can think about and know, and say, okay, it's been 3 months. He's looking for a cartridge, so it's probably an ink cartridge, and it's probably the same brand. I guess he didn't change his printer in the meantime. If you buy let's say you just added a coffee machine to your cart, so like the whole machine. If you type for coffee again in the search bar, or you look for coffee, probably you're not going to look for a coffee machine because you already have one in your cart. Probably you're going to search for the consumable, either the beans or the capsules. So maybe I can remove the coffee machine, and maybe I can also give you the beans or the capsules that are compatible with your model. So again, that doesn't necessarily take AI or machine learning or even rocket science, but it's more like thinking about your user and thinking about the kind of experience that they have. I'm really passionate about that topic, because when you think about search, and also when you use something like Algolia that kind of works out of the box, it can be like, okay, I just set it up and boom, I have search. It's great. But you kind of want to think about the use case. We recently redid the search on the documentation of Algolia, and it took a lot of thought, because you're searching into content. It's not the same as searching into items like on Amazon. So that's a whole different model, and you're using the same technology. You're using the same search engine and the same endpoints, same SDKs, but you're not necessarily going to have the same strategy. And that's where your added value is. That's where also your creativity is. There's so much that you can create on top of it. And I'm really excited to see where AI is going to go, where it's going to take us. But I'm super eager to see what people are going to do with it. Like, to me, that's the most exciting, seeing where people take it and the kind of ideas that when you're like, here are tools, and they're going to be like, wow, okay, now ideas are starting, and we're going to play with it, and we're going to twist it and take it to places that you didn't even imagine. That to me is extremely exciting.
It's like when GPT-3 came out, which was basically like AI for completing your sentence. It was one of the use cases was doing that, and people would just train these models they would just dump in like the beginning of a Stack Overflow question, and then it would just answer it for them. Like, it's just crazy, those type of things it can do.
Yeah, that's really exciting to me. It's like we have the tools, and then like the application is endless. But yeah, like I think it's important not to see those tools that are like, oh, that's just a tool. I'm just gonna use it, and that's it. It solves my problem. It solves a lot of problems, but then it gives you the fun part. Like, and the thing is that sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really like that point, because the search being solved is part of the process. But if the UX of your actual interface is bad, or you're not surfacing the other relevant content to get into the search, you're not going to make it there. So you just have to think about the more holistic product experience.
Yeah, and that's the whole purpose of DX, and what we do in the DX chapter is that we want to remove as much of the hard stuff as possible. So the search aspect is solved, and it's within the engine and with the APIs that we offer. But we also want to remove the pain from indexing your data. Like, it shouldn't be hard to index or re-index, update, delete your data. It shouldn't be hard to, like, when you have a lot of data, to chunk it. I shouldn't have to ask you to do that beforehand. It shouldn't be hard for you also to create an autocomplete experience that is accessible. So that is the kind of things like we are about to release a new version, like the first version 1 of our autocomplete library. And that's something that we remove. Like, we remove that pain of building because building an accessible autocomplete experience is a pain. Like, it shouldn't be your pain. It should be the pain of the people who work on that, who work on search. And then you get the fun part. It's not over just because you implemented it and it works. Then it's like, yeah, all the hard stuff is done. Now you can focus on the fun stuff. And there's so many fun stuff to do, especially with search, especially with something as dynamic and as interactive as search. So many things, so many experiments that you can try.
Yeah, you mentioned you recently redid that docs experience to use the new and improved version of search. And is this the exact same experience that the new Tailwind docs site is using, where it has like the full screen modal? And because I've seen that before and it was really slick to use.
Yes, so it builds up on top of the same kind of research. So there are two things to differentiate. So there is the Algolia documentation, which has search in it, and we have a product that we have that is called Doc Search. And I'm just making the difference here because sometimes people mix up the two. So Doc Search is a free service that, like, if you're using any kind of technical documentation, it's probably Doc Search. So you have it on React Docs. You have it. I don't think it's on Vercel, but I think it's on Next.js. Maybe I'm not sure. But it's on Tailwind. And so if you've got on like the Vue 3 docs, if you've been on the latest Tailwind site, if you've been on the latest DocUserist site, you've seen Doc Search v3. And so it's a brand new experience where you search in a modal window. So there's that, and then it becomes full screen when you're on a phone. But you also have many different aspects, like we group results by topic instead of just sorting them like one by one. And so all that work happened. And then it was time for us. So the thing is that Doc Search is really catering to any kind of technical documentation. So it has to fit the use case of everybody. But then it was time for us to redo the documentation, the search on our documentation. And we're like, okay, we learned so many things when building the V3 of the new Doc Search. Let's try to build on top of that knowledge and to build something that would be even better, because we fully control the data here. We know exactly what we can use. And so that's, and at the same moment, we have this autocomplete library that I was telling you about, which is currently still V0, and we have an alpha out, and we're like, okay, we've built that. Let's dog food it. Let's try it. Let's use it ourselves before we put it in the hands of people. And so we're like, okay, we're gonna have the best of both worlds, all that knowledge that we learn, and we control the data. And also we have an unlimited Algolia account, which is pretty nice. And so that's how we built that experience. So if you go on the documentation of Algolia, you will see that the search now opens in a modal window. So that's the same as you see on Tailwind, but you also have this experience where the modal is split between the list of results on one side and a preview panel on the other side. And that's one of the biggest aspects of that new experience that we basically stole from Spotlight, is that you're going to be able to at the same time have that compact list of results, so you can show many of them, but you can showcase much more information. So you can surface a lot of information that's going to help you decide, do I want to go there? Do I want to navigate there? Even before you do.
Yeah, I'm a heavy Tailwind user, so I've been on the Tailwind site in the docs quite a bit. So I've definitely used the search experience a lot, and I have to say it's been really nice. I feel like I'm able to find what I'm looking for within 3 to 4 letters, usually text opacity or line height. They're like, I'm able just to quickly find the right things, or even go to guides or docs or all the different things on there. So yeah, it's exciting to see that spread more. And I also really like the point about dog fooding your own experience, because I feel like that's something that we do at Vercel as well too. The Vercel.com and Next.js.org are always on the like absolute latest canary version of Next.js. And it's good because if you run into problems, your customers are definitely going to run into problems. So you're able to work out the kinks ahead of time. Like if you're unhappy with something, they're definitely going to be unhappy with something. So it's a good product strategy, I think.
Yes, definitely. And that's something that we enjoy also, because it gives us so much room to not only experiment, but also, innovate. Like, and you were talking about the Tailwind docs. and the fact that you're able to find things, and like there are so many patterns that came into Doc Search v3 that you can actually leverage right away in the Tailwind docs that don't even have anything to do with Algolia, the search engine, and not even leveraging Algolia per se. For example, when you're on the Tailwind search, when you have a search that you do often, so like I'm a big Tailwind user as well, and like I'm always looking for the colors, like just the color swatches, but on the default scheme. What you can actually do when you do that search is that you can favorite it. You can just check it and say that is in my favorite searches. That has nothing to do with Algolia. Like it does not use any features of Algolia. That's basically something in your local storage, but you're improving the search experience of the end user. So that, that's the part about creativity that we were talking about earlier. There are so many things that you can do that is going to make it easier and better, and it goes beyond just the tech that you're using, but also thinking about the use case. When it comes to documentation, like among the patterns that we've found, we always do the same searches, because I always like, for example, it's not use effect, it's use memo or something like that in React. Like there's one that I don't yet understand well, or use callback or whatever, and so I always search for that thing. I might as well favorite it so I can have it right away. And that's a pattern that is different than when you're buying something. You're not necessarily going to search for the same thing. I type my MacBook once every 5 or 10 years. I'm not going to buy one every year. So that's really tailored to what you do. When you're on the Tailwind docs, you may see that you have nested results, like you have something and then you have something that is linked to it. So that's different from e-commerce. On e-commerce, one article is usually self-contained. It's like an iPhone, a MacBook, or whatever. When it's content, you're playing with interconnected pieces of information. A page relates to another page. Usually a record, like which is like the basic unit of a search result, is not going to be a page. It's going to be a paragraph within a page. So it's going to be linked to maybe a parent page, or it's going to be linked to other paragraphs. And you don't want them to be necessarily spread out and have one here and one lower, because it doesn't matter as much which one is at the top of the list when you're doing e-com. Yes, definitely. You want what the person is going to buy, you want it to be at the top. But like when I'm going on the View 3 documentation and I type composition, there's no way for you to know exactly what I want. Do I want the API reference for the composition API? Do I want the intro for the composition API? You may not know that. But what you can do is say, okay, I know that this person is interested in that. I can regroup things thematically so they make sense together, and I can surface as much data as I can so they see that there is a variety of things. And then you can, on top of that, you can personalize. If I've been to the site many times, maybe I'm less interested in the concepts. If I've seen that page over and over, maybe after a while I know it, and that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. So you can make some kind of predictions based on that. But it's going to be a very different use case. And that's one of the things that we try to do in the new search experience on the docs, is to make sure that when you see a result, it's contextual. You see it with other results that make sense together. When you're looking for something and it matches in several UI widgets, you see them all together, because if that's what you're looking for, you're probably looking to, you probably have other concerns that are related to it. And so you don't want to see stuff that have nothing to do with one another.
Yep, I agree so much. That's something that we're trying to do with Vercel.com, basically, so that when you search, you have docs, you have API docs, you have knowledge base or support stuff, you have everything interconnected in one big graph. which is really helpful when you don't care where the content's at. You just want your question solved. It might be on Stack Overflow. Like, I just want my question. I don't care where it's at. Just please help.
Yeah, and it's also sometimes you may you want to search in all those sections, but sometimes you may not have a match in one of those, and so you don't that's one of the things we did as well, is that we did not want that to be static. Oh, we're searching in this, and that, but saying we're searching in things, and maybe it will match in some sections, and maybe there will be no matches. And then we're going to reorder that, because we don't care as much as in e-commerce search when it comes to the position of something. We're going to regroup them on the front end instead of doing four calls to four different indices and having, the block with a blog, and because you have zero match, but you have it on top, you have blog zero match, and then the stuff that you're looking for is way, way down, and you have to scroll for it. So again, there are many ways, there are many solutions, but depending on the actual problem that you're trying to solve, there are so many different ways to solve it.
Absolutely. I want to quickly just say thanks to everyone who's joining in the chat. We appreciate everybody joining, and feel free to leave any questions in here as we chat, and we'll try to get to them. But I want to just kind of change gears a little bit. I want to talk about Tailwind. What do you like about Tailwind and utility CSS? Because I'm a big fan.
Oh my God. I'm such a big fan of Tailwind. You know what? Tailwind has come such a long way since I remember, I think it was in maybe 2018 or even before that. It was not even out, but Adam started communicating about it, and I think even the repo was out with just a README, and it was trending hard because you had people being like, wow, this is fantastic and it's going to be awesome and I want to use that, but at the same time, so much hate. So many people thinking that this is the worst thing that ever happened to CSS, and it's never going to scale, it's never going to work. And you know what? I'm not going to blame anyone, because I know I probably made some kind of dumb predictions about stuff, and I'm not saying that it was dumb. People have their opinions, and sometimes it doesn't work. And I don't think Tailwind works in every situation. If you're building, let's say you're building a UI library, and you want to expose classes for people to be able to style it, you're not going to use Tailwind and say, okay, well, put your own Tailwind in it. But what I love about Tailwind is that there are so many things, but I would say from the top of my mind is that it removes a lot of cognitive load for me. I don't have to think about coming up with class names. Yes. Remembering that if I remove a component, I will have to remove the class that goes with it, which is in another file. So there, my component or my thing is spread out in multiple files, and it's fragmented through my code base. I don't have to think about that. I don't even have to think of, how do you do that again in CSS? And it's not to say, it takes the pain away from writing CSS. I love CSS and it's awesome to write. But when you're building something, you just want to go fast. And yes, the class to do a grid is always going to be the same. And so I can really learn that tool, and I'm productive. I'm super productive with it. So to me, that's the beauty of it, is that it really removes a lot of the cognitive load when it comes to styling. And also, I think that it scales really, really well. So I'm not necessarily speaking about the server, when you're building it, but it actually scales really well. Your CSS stays very, very small. And no matter when you're working with designers and they come up with new ideas and for new pages and new stuff, usually it can be very different looking, but it's usually going to be on brand. So you're not going to have necessarily new colors or new things that make new tokens, new design tokens that don't make sense in your domain, in your brand. And so what's great is that you have an existing product, and when you're building on real product, You have existing products. It's not nothing is very like nothing is new all the time,
Oh yeah.
and so you have this existing product that you want to reuse, and you get a new Figma design, and you're like, yes, I can build it now using my tools. I don't
Mhm.
have to be like, okay, first I need to write this, and then go back and forth between the styles and the implementation of the styles, which is your HTML or your JSX or Vue templates. You're just like, I have my tools. I take care of my tools. I build this library of tokens. So like my background colors or my shadows and all of that, and I can count of that. And it's kind of like when you're working with code like JavaScript or PHP or whatever, and you're building your utilities or you're building any kind of pieces of logic that you can reuse later. And when it's time, then you have the tools, you have it. So to me, that's really the productivity and the freedom that it gives you. It's like, okay, I have my design, now I can go at it and I can reuse the stuff, and I can actually maybe refine some of the choices that I've made, but it's never going to be like, wow, I thought about those abstractions too early and now they're broken, and I'm going to
Mhm.
have to undo many things that I took already so much time to do in the first place. So, yeah, like that's really the beauty. I'm so grateful for the Tailwind team, for Adam, and for the Tailwind team for building it, because yeah, this is probably the package that I use the most, along with Prettier and Babel.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is really fantastic.
I think it's hard to pick a favorite, but I think my favorite thing is that in my role, I'm creating a lot of apps, whether I'm demoing a feature or I'm, building an example or showing people how to do things. So one, like the speed to get up and running is awesome. But then two, when I come back to these apps in 6 months or however long, it's really easy to understand what's going on because it's the same class names. Like you learn it and then you memorize it and then you come back and it's the same stuff. And it makes it really easy to jump back in there. I've really, really liked that over the past, 6 months to a year as I've been using Tailwind and diving into those. It's so nice.
Yes, and I've wrote extensively on the topic of utility first, and I can definitely understand the kind of concerns or what makes people like back away from it. But I
Mhm.
think nothing is none of the problems that I've seen are a dead end. Like,
Yep.
one of the things that people say is like, oh, but my HTML is becoming huge, or like, not huge, but like when I open my file, it's littered with class name.
Mhm.
Um, that's easy to fix. Like I'm back in the days, we were using text, like basic text editors to code, and now we're using like VSCode or WebStorm, like actual IDEs like WebStorm, or very advanced editors like Visual Studio. But the thing is that I'm sure that anybody can come up with an extension where you're going to be able to say, okay, fold all my class names, and then
Yep.
you don't see it anymore, and you're just going to be able to see it if you want, or you can already use like the class names package if
Mhm.
you want to have, like, you do CX and you put them as arguments, and so they're going to be one below the other, and you're going to be able to fold it if that's something that you're interested in. But to me, what's interesting and important is to go beyond the first the first impression that you have on something,
Yep.
and to try and think of ways that it could be solved. Yes, it's gonna be like, it's not a big problem. It requires work, but it's not a big problem to create something where you're going to be able to fold the class names.
Mhm.
uh, but what can be a problem is the scalability of CSS, the scalability of a CSS code base. When you have many style sheets with many hacks or many things where you don't even remember why you wrote it that way, you don't even remember where the style sheet is, you don't know why it's doing this or it's doing that, or it's overriding a piece of style. So yeah, like, it's really interesting to try and go beyond why you think you hate something, and maybe try to look at the positive aspects. And sometimes, like, it's not for everybody. If you don't like it, and your team doesn't like it, and you're not productive with it, don't use it. Like, don't use it because people are using it and they are telling you that you should use it. If you don't have any scalability problems and nobody at your team likes it, go ahead. Like, that's usually like it's the same debate when people are like, oh, should I use Vue or should I use React? Use what you know. Use what and your team likes and what you're productive with. Don't use what anybody says you should be using. There are things that play a role when you pick up a technology. Maybe there are some, if you want to build a JavaScript heavy website, maybe you're not going to go with Knockout.js. But when it comes to picking, Angular, Vue, whatever, pick what you know, and we don't have to have opinions about everything.
I agree wholeheartedly to that. I cannot agree more, actually. I feel like part of my day, almost every day, is tried to help people understand all the differences, especially with Next.js. And I say, you know what? You might not need Next.js. You might just be better off doing vanilla JavaScript, or you might be better off using Svelte or Vue or Nuxt or all the other options out there. So yeah, it's definitely important. And even with Tailwind, like, there's so many good opinions for, people who don't know design that well. They can kind of just throw it up and get a pretty good design going. I think that's also helped people really get into just building more applications and get into open source more. Hi to everybody in the chat. I'm also curious, you made a few open source packages. I saw Dinero, Browser Store. Like, what's your opinion on maybe the pros and cons of building open source? Because it's tough. It is really tough.
Oh yeah.
And there's lots of good things, but it's tough.
If you look at Dinero, you will see that it hasn't been touched in a while, and I have issues piling up. And let's go with the cons right away. Open source can suck your time like crazy and make you feel incredibly guilty. And I've been through a phase at some point, and I'm sorry if anybody who's waiting for an answer from me on Dinero. I'm so sorry, but we're humans, and we have our own stuff going on. And sometimes, like, when you see that there are packages where you have just a bunch of people working on it, and it's not necessarily because they don't want other people to contribute. It's just like the problem is really hard, or people don't want to contribute. You will always have more users than contributors. But also the fact that just managing a whole team around the product or responding to answers is hard. It takes a lot of time. And, like 2020 COVID year, I've not been willing to touch any open source anything, and be more on my computer, like be in my house where I'm working every day, and then take my computer and feel like my house is now just work. So yeah, that's definitely something that we have to be mindful of, is like our own mental health and the impact that it can have on your personal life.
Absolutely. Like, I think if more people made open source, they would understand the empathy of those who create open source, and not only just the difficulty in putting those things out there and starting to create that community, but I have so much more respect now for people who maintain large open source packages and work through the issues and stuff, because I'm like a fly on the wall. Like, I help out a little bit, but when I look at some of what the other people do in the space, it's just like so much work, and it requires so much effort that, you have to have a serious empathy for the folks who do it full time.
Yes, and I think doing open source, and it has many upsides. First, it can have really good upsides for if you're interested in like developing your personal brand. Like you want to be in programming, and I didn't do like any engineering school or anything, which at some point of my life has been something like I felt a little bit like I was not up to the standards that companies would. And building open source and having people rely on my work and on my code was also kind of a confidence boost. Like, okay, I can build stuff. Maybe it's not the best, but I can build stuff that is useful to people. And also, I think it's what it helps you develop, which is really important, especially as a developer, is coming up with solutions. It's really easy to be in a mindset of, this doesn't work, I don't like it, it's crap, fix it.
Yes.
While when you solve your own problem, and like the most successful packages, open source packages, are going to be the ones that usually solve the author's problem, because if you have a problem, probably other people will or already have it. But it's really being solution oriented. Instead of complaining about something not existing or not working, it's like, how can I make it happen? How can I fix it? Okay, there's a bug in this repo. How can I contribute? Instead of just saying, hey, any news on that? Or how is it going? Yeah, and I can understand that sometimes you're building something, like we're all busy building something, and you don't necessarily have the time to fix a bug in another repo and understand the code base. Like, that's hard. And so I can understand that sometimes you have a problem with a piece of technology that is really the cornerstone. Like, if Babel is not working, it's gonna create a lot of unhappiness. But at the same time, it's like other people are working on that, and they're not getting paid. They're doing that. A lot of them are doing that out of the goodness of their heart and on their own time. So now you have solutions, like you have Open Collective and Patreon and stuff like that, so you can support open source. But it's not like everything that we're using is backed by money. Like, it's true for Vue, it's true for Babel, it's true for some high profile projects, but what they are using, like the small packages and the small things, not everybody gets money out of that. So it's I think it's interesting to go there with a mindset of giving back. Like, if everybody is in a mindset of giving back, ultimately it makes everything better. If you come here to take, then yes, you're probably not in the right place, and you want to use something else, and you want to pay for a service where you're going to be allowed to complain because you're paying for it.
That's so true. I think there's a meme out there somewhere about how, like, there's that one random person in Nebraska who's like maintaining a package that's used by Webpack or Babel, or like the core tooling of everything that's out there. Yeah, we could all have more, give a little more empathy to those in open source, especially the smaller packages too.
Sorry, I was thinking of that meme that you were talking about. I think it's an XKCD comics. I think we were talking about it with coworkers, and I think CURL that we're all using is maintained by one guy.
Oh, okay.
Can you fathom it?
No,
there's one person building that thing and maintaining that thing that we're all using and all documenting.
Oh yeah,
that's crazy to me.
For many, many years. It's probably been around for 20 years, maybe probably longer than that. I don't even know. That's awesome. Well, I do want to be mindful of your time. I know we went over the hour, and I know it's late where you're at. So thank you so much for joining today and chatting about everything. I know we went off topic a little bit, but it was fun. It was really, really awesome to learn more about what y'all are doing with search and just the future of search in general. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone in the chat for joining. We appreciate you having to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll have to do it again sometime. Maybe. It was a lot of fun. This will be up on YouTube for those who want to watch. So yeah, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Bye.